Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Captain's Table. Nope. Hey guys, it's your boy Joey, and welcome to another Ultra Sun. Fuck that. Hello there, everybody. This is Use here, and today, not today. Welcome back, my cheesy minions, to another exciting The Killer Nacho Wi-Fi battle. All right, guys, settle down for a second. Captain B-Nard here. And now that all the inside jokes are out of the way, I want to talk to you guys today about the NGDL3. That is the Draft League tournament that I have been participating in for the past few months, run, of course, by the killer Nacho. And now that the tournament is over for me, I thought it would be cool to go ahead and give a review and reflection on everything that's gone down in the tournament. So, I'm going to start off by throwing some general stats at you guys as far as my performance in the tournament. Then I'm going to kind of go through each individual matchup that I had throughout the 12 weeks of the tournament and kind of talk about that. I'm also going to be showing you guys the evolution of my team throughout the tournament as well. And then I'm going to show you the stats of all my Pokemon at the end of it and kind of make some more general comments after that. So we're going to go ahead and just jump right into that. So in case you couldn't tell by the thumbnail, I ended up finishing this tournament with 4 wins and 8 losses, which is not a very good record, unfortunately. That was good enough to land me 12th place in the tournament out of 16 people. So I finished somewhere around the middle of the bottom of the pack. So again, not very good. Not the worst, but unfortunately not good enough to earn me a spot in the top 8, which was something that I was gunning for. So that was kind of a disappointment, honestly. But now I'm just going to go ahead and take you guys through all of the matches that I had, and of course, like I said, the progression of my team throughout that period. So, um, right now, I'm going to show you guys the first version of my team, the initial draft that I had in this tournament, which ended up being my team for the first 3 weeks of the tournament. Even looking back on it now, I still feel like this was a good draft. I feel like it could have been better, but still a good draft in my opinion. So, in the first week of the tournament, we actually ended up playing Visually, who is a very well known PokeTuber and a very good battler. Um, so honestly, one other thing I forgot to mention actually about this was that this is actually my first draft league as well. So we kind of got thrown right into the deep end here with having our first match in our first draft league against someone the caliber of Visually. So we ended up losing that match 2-0, but that actually was a very close, very competitive match. Um, I will say there were definitely a couple of hacks working against me in the early goings of this matchup. Although not gonna say that it would have swung the battle in his favor completely, but it definitely was a factor. But yeah, it was a pretty solid match through and through. It was ended up just kind of being a stall out at the end. The other thing I will say is that I feel like I probably didn't prepare for this game as well as I could have or should have. Again, with this being the first match I ever had in any draft league. Kind of a learning experience, I guess you would say, but still ended up being a very good match. Um, so then I'm just going to go ahead and jump into week 2 of the tournament. In that week, we actually faced the killer Nacho, the guy who runs the draft league, and ended up losing that one actually as well, 1-0. But he is a very good battler, actually, of course, and this ended up being a great match, one of the closest matches of the season, actually. Um, Really solid match through and through. It really came down to just a couple of predictions at a couple key points in the match, specifically toward the end. Um, so it was a really solid match, really evenly matched game too. Again, I kind of feel like my prep work for this game was maybe a little underwhelming. I feel like I probably could have done better. If had I applied myself or taken the time to do so. But yeah, it still ended up being a really solid match. But again, unfortunately, couldn't get the win on that one either. So that is going to bring us actually to our third match, week three opponent, and that was Mr. Chabry, who is another pretty well-known PokeTuber, another good battler. This week we actually did end up winning 2-0 against him. That was another really solid battle, another really close competitive match. This week, I feel like I kind of learned my lessons a little bit from the first couple of weeks, and I spent more time preparing for my opponent's team and doing things of that nature to try and maximize my chances. Obviously, so pretty solid match through and through there. I don't really have too much to say about it, but we are going to move on from that. So, the one thing that you will note after this point is that I actually decided to make my first transaction in week four, and that was actually to trade away my Vileplume in favor of getting Trevenant. So Trevenant was a Pokemon that I was actually planning on drafting to this team originally, but it had been drafted to someone else's team before I could get to it, so I didn't have the chance to pick it up. They actually ended up getting rid of it the week prior, so that opened it up to be acquired by me, and I did decide to go ahead and pick that up. I wanted a ghost type on the team, and that was one of my regrets actually in my initial draft, was that I wasn't able to grab a ghost type, or didn't grab a ghost type. So picking that up, I think, was definitely a plus for me. And that is going to lead us into our week four match, which was against Ominous Acid, who is another YouTuber, although I believe he just announced he was retiring from YouTube. But he's also the guy who made most of the logos for this draft league, including my own Philadelphia Pidgeys logo, so that's pretty cool. We ended up winning this match 2-0, which was another really good match, really close and really competitive. Definitely got a couple of hacks on my side that helped me pick up the win here, but it was a very solid match. Can't say anything bad about it. So that is going to run us into our week five match, and that was versus Quilliams, another really good battler off of the Discord community there. And we ended up losing this one, unfortunately, 1-0, but it was another insanely close match, really competitive. Came down to a couple of predictions, a couple of particulars of sets that we were using in the game, but just an insanely close game, really good game, honestly. Really solid match. Can't really say too much else about it. But it was at this point that I decided actually to make my second transaction in the league, and that was actually to drop my Mega Alakazam off the team in favor of just keeping the standard Alakazam. And I did that for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, when I made my initial draft, I wanted to grab two Megas because I had hoped that it would kind of throw my opponent's prep off for me, or at least that was my hope, because they wouldn't know which Mega I was going to bring, and I wouldn't know which Mega I was going to bring either. However, I found that there was really no scenario in which I didn't want to bring Mega Aggron, because I kind of made it one of the cornerstones of this team here. So there really wasn't any scenario that I was going through with really any of my matches that I wanted to leave Mega Aggron out. And since Standard Aggron's not really that viable, and Standard Alakazam is, there was really no scenario that I devised that I was going to be using Mega Alakazam and Standard Aggron versus, Standard Alakazam and Mega Aggron, and I wanted to free up a little more, money so that I could potentially purchase some higher tier Pokemon to use for the rest of the tournament. So, with that being said, that takes us to our week six opponent, which was Kadri, aka Toronto Pure. and we ended up losing this match 3-0 actually. And a couple things I want to note about this match actually. First and foremost was that this was probably the best example of the season of me kind of having a disadvantage on paper as far as teams go, because his team just actually ended up matching up really well against my team on paper, and it was something that I tried to prepare for, but it just wasn't working out. Unfortunately, he had a couple of pretty solid Pokemon on there that just really countered my team pretty well. So that was one factor. Another factor in this match was something that I actually wasn't even aware of until this match, and that was the fact that apparently in this league you're allowed to use Pokemon with move sets that are not legally obtainable within Gen 7. And the specific example I want to bring up of that is that the fact that he had a Hitmontop on his team that carried Sucker Punch, which was actually not a move that you can get on Hitmontop in any other generation aside from Gen 4, specifically in Platinum, because the move tutor there allows you to get Sucker Punch. You might have been able to get it in Heart Gold and Soul Silver too. I don't exactly remember, but point being is that that move on that Pokemon is unobtainable in any other generation aside from Gen 4. And since there's no way to transfer a Pokemon from Gen 4 up to Gen 7, there's no way to legally obtain the move set in Gen 7. So what I was unaware of is, I guess, the fact that apparently you are allowed to essentially hack your game and give your Pokemon a move set that is not legally obtainable within the generation. And that is what happened here. Again, I'm not going to go as far as to say that decided the outcome of the battle solely, because I don't think it did. But I definitely did play a factor as far as the outcome of the battle. Not gonna lie to you guys, I did feel a little bit cheated about that, because I kind of don't understand why that's allowed, but it kind of is what it is. Again, having a pretty sizable disadvantage on paper in this game, um, it was what it was as well, and kind of made it so that wasn't necessarily the sole deciding factor of the game, but still, pretty good match nonetheless, despite all those factors. So that is actually going to take us into um, the next thing I did, which is actually what would end up being my final transaction of the league. And that was to go ahead and drop Snorlax off the team in favor of acquiring Primarina. So that's something that I did with the extra money that I freed up. That was kind of my plan all along with the previous transaction, was to free up some money so that I could drop Snorlax and kind of grab a Pokemon that was higher tier, because Snorlax really wasn't pulling its weight, pun intended, on the team. Similarly with Vileplume, they were kind of picks that were made toward the end of the draft, because there kind of wasn't anything else available at that point that I wanted to grab. Um, so that just kind of ended up was the way that it ended up. So I ended up grabbing the Primarina. That was the other thing about the draft, or my initial team that I drafted, was that I wanted to draft a fairy type, but didn't really get the chance to, or by the time I was looking into fairy types, most of them were either taken or were stuff that I couldn't afford with the money that I had remaining. So that kind of ended up, being what it was. So I had to move things around a little bit to go ahead and get that going. But yeah, so that's going to take us into our Week 7 match. That was actually the rematch with Visually, which we did end up losing, unfortunately. This time it was actually a 4-0 loss. And this was probably my most demoralizing loss of the season, honestly, just due to the fact that the way we lost, basically being stalled out once again. We kind of, hit the same wall, because he actually brought the exact same 6 Pokemon that he did the first time that we faced him, which kind of threw me off because I was expecting him to change his team up, although he did change the sets up on the Pokemon, I believe. But I was thinking, well, he probably wasn't going to try to, pull the same tactics that he did in the first battle, but he unfortunately ended up doing that. So that did actually surprise me a little bit. Again, given the fact that I kind of lost in the same fashion the second time as I did the first time, it was kind of frustrating because I feel that I definitely should have prepared better for this match. I did prepare a little bit better than I did the first time, I think, but still it was not enough. So and again, he is a very good battler, well-known YouTuber as well. So ended up taking another loss there on that one. So that is going to actually bring us to week 8 in the tournament, and that was against Zach, another good player off of the Discord community, and ended up winning that one on a 2-0. It was a pretty solid game. Not a lot to say about it. He actually got a couple of hacks in his favor toward the middle of the game, but was able to overcome that and end up getting the win, which was nice. Trying to come back, behind the 8 ball at this point in the tournament. Um, so that is actually going to bring us to week 9 of the tournament, which was a rematch against Ominous Acid from earlier in the tournament. And this was another match, honestly, because he had actually made some transactions since the last time we faced, and he brought a couple different Pokemon, changed a couple different things up. This was another match that I kind of just felt like on paper we had pretty sizable disadvantage, just due to the fact that, and I actually forgot to mention this the first time that I talked about it, was that he was one of the two people in this draft league that drafted an Uber, and his Uber was Arceus, so he was willing to pay the high price of drafting an Uber, and Arceus was the Uber, so trying to work around that was definitely a pretty big challenge both weeks. Like I said, the first time there was a little bit of luck involved on my side that ended up resulting in my win, but this time, unfortunately, there was no such thing, and ended up losing it, as I said. It just was another match again, like I said, that just kind of felt like I was behind the whole game, and, just ended up taking the loss. But that is going to bring us all the way to week 10 here, and that matchup was against Teedit, again another player from the Discord community, and ended up losing that one as well on a 2-0. I have to say this was probably the most disappointing loss that we took the entire season. For a couple different reasons. First and foremost, because at this point, this was actually the loss that officially eliminated me and my team from potentially making the top 8 playoff. So that was disappointing because obviously that was something that I was shooting for. The other thing is in this match, I feel like this was probably the one game the entire season that my team actually matched up really well against my opponent's team on paper. So I feel like I definitely should have done better. And not to mention that in the beginning of this game, I actually ended up making a lot of really stupid mistakes that ended up carrying through the game. Almost was able to bring it back at the end, but unfortunately, just too many mistakes were made and wasn't able to get it done there. Um, so that one was disappointing, definitely for sure. So that is actually going to bring us to week 11, and that was versus Use, another PokeTuber, and another member of the Discord community, obviously. We ended up getting the win in this one, 2-0. This was a really solid match, again, through and through. A couple of hacks on my side definitely tipped the battle in my favor in this one, but just a really, really solid match, all in all, just a really great game. Um, so don't really have too much else to say about it other than that. So that is actually going to bring us to the final week, week 12, and that was the rematch versus Mr. Chabry. And this time, unfortunately, we ended up losing 1-0. But this was just an absolutely great game, honestly. It was so close, could have gone either way. Much like the battle with the Killer Nacho week 2, much like the battle with Quilliams week 5. This was the third of the trio of matches that were just so incredibly close, so incredibly competitive. Definitely could have gone either way if it was for a couple predictions differently. So just a really solid match, and even though it was a loss, just was honestly a really good way to end the season, since at this point we weren't going to make the top cut anyway. But just having a really good game like that was just a nice way to end the season there. So that pretty much covers all of my matches throughout the tournament. So now I want to show you guys some stats from all of my Pokemon here. So this right here is going to show you guys all the Pokemon that were members of the Philadelphia Pidgeys here in the NGDL3. As you can see, the top are going to be the 10 Pokemon that I ended on, and then at the bottom, the Pokemon that I dropped throughout the season when they were dropped and all that. So the numbers here that you're going to see on the right-hand side of this are going to be first the kill-death ratio of the Pokemon, and then, of course, you're going to see how many games they appeared in as well, which is, in a lot of cases, proportionate to either the kill or death ratios. So, as you can see, really the cornerstones of this team throughout the entire season ended up being Gudra and Mega Aggron. Those were the two Pokemon that I brought in all 12 games that I played, and that was kind of by design because when I drafted this team, that was really my goal. Was I wanted to make those guys the cornerstones of my team. Gudra being one of the most specially defensive Pokemon in the game, and just a really strong, solid Pokemon for any team. Mega Aggron kind of being the same thing, but on the physical side, just one of the most physically defensive Pokemon in the game. Just a really solid, backbone of any team, in my opinion. And those I definitely don't regret. Centering the team around those two guys really, because they were power players. Really put in a lot of work throughout the season. Definitely pulled their weight in a huge way. So coming in right under them, we have the Alakazam, actually, which I had in 10 of the 12 games that I played. Another cornerstone of the team, more or less, although I did leave it out a couple of weeks just based on what my opponent was using at that time. But just another really solid Pokemon. And then it kind of filters down from there. We have kind of the center of the team here with Talonflame, Seismitoad, Hitmonlee, Raikou, and then Primarina and Trevenant as well. That's like over half the team right there, I know, in the middle. But those were kind of my alternates, so they all ended up being like a maybe every other week type schedule as far as me using them goes. Really good Pokemon in my opinion, just Pokemon that I really like to use. Also, that's the other thing with this team, is I tried to draft Pokemon that I just really enjoy using, but at the same time we're also competitively viable, obviously. um, but yeah, those were all kind of like every other week Pokemon. And then finally, coming in at the bottom, I have the Articuno, which unfortunately was the only Pokemon that ended up being on the team at the end, or throughout the entire season, that I didn't even get one kill on, which was kind of disappointing. I kind of drafted this thing, with a mindset of, again, just really liking Articuno, it being one of my favorite Pokemon. I drafted it with the mindset of that thinking that this draft league was going to be, a little more casual, a little less cutthroat, and kind of got a pretty rude awakening on that note, which I'll talk about more in a second. But yeah, so I was kind of disappointed that I couldn't get at least one kill for the Articuno. I was anticipating it on bringing it more. Unfortunately, I only ended up bringing it once out of 12 weeks, and that was just kind of, I thought that I was going to have more opportunities to bring it than I did, but it just ended up not matching up very well against just about anybody that I faced. And it was in a situation where, since it was a very low cost Pokemon, it wasn't really worth my while to try and transact it away. So it just kind of sat there and did nothing the entire season. So as opposed to the Pokemon I ended up transacting, the Vileplume, the Mega Alakazam, and the Snorlax, getting rid of those definitely freed up some space. Those were kind of in the same boat as Articuno, in the sense that they just weren't matching up very well, or weren't working out very well on the team, or jiving very well, whatever you want to say. But they actually, since they were higher cost Pokemon, it was beneficial for me to get rid of them to try and replace them with something else. So, unfortunately, only three Pokemon, I believe, that I used ended up having more kills than they did deaths. Those were Alakazam, the Mega Aggron, and Hitmonlee. If I had to give a team MVP award out, I would have to give it, I would say, to Aggron, Mega Aggron this season, because Aggron was just an absolute tank, put in a lot of work this season. Of course, I also had Gudra, Talonflame breaking even on the kills, which was nice, and then everybody else kind of had more deaths than kills, but that just kind of was what it was. Didn't really have like a central Pokemon, like a setup sweeper or anything like that, that I was kind of designated to, kind of get all the kills or anything like that. Um, but yeah, that's kind of where that ended up there with all the Pokemon. All right, so that pretty much brings us to the end of the stats and all that kind of stuff. So at this point, I do want to kind of give my own reflection of the season of here in the NGDL3 for the Philadelphia Pidgeys. So I will say, going into this draft league, like I said, this being my first draft league tournament, um, I had expectations, obviously certain expectations, certain goals that I wanted to hit. I kind of had an idea in my mind of how things were going to work out. And to be honest with you guys, I went into this with kind of the mindset of that it was going to be more of a casual, more easygoing, fun kind of tournament, because I don't think I mentioned this before, but there actually is no prize in this tournament. It's just, bragging rights. Um, but yeah, I was expecting that, and what I got instead was kind of a much more competitive, cutthroat environment, which was something that I wasn't fully expecting. Which is good for different reasons, because I am a pretty competitive person. I do enjoy competing in events like that. That just wasn't what I was really expecting out of this draft league, so that was definitely a learning curve for me. Um, I will say that as far as my draft goes, knowing now what, if I had known then what I know now, I probably would have drafted my team a little bit differently. I would have made some decisions differently as far as prep goes and that kind of thing. Um, but it is what it is. I was anticipating having a good time, having a lot of fun, that kind of stuff. I did have fun doing this, I will say, but not in the same way that I had anticipated, like I said, and not probably as much as I had anticipated. Like I said, just because it ended up being a much more competitive, cutthroat environment than I was expecting. Not only that, but my division, actually, the green division in this tournament, because the tournament is actually divided into four divisions, each containing four players. It just so happened that the division I landed in was definitely the most competitive division in the league. Everybody was just either an excellent player and/or had just a really strong team going. So that was definitely kind of like just being thrown in the deep end, as I said before, right off the bat with my first draft league tournament. But that was interesting, experience, good experience, I would say. But yeah, that was definitely something that was kind of an untangible factor. There were quite a few of those, I think, going into this that were working against old B-Nard and his Philadelphia Pidgeys here. But it's all good. It ended up being, a fun experience and an interesting experience. Something that I would definitely do again, I think. Um, like I said, there are definitely some changes that I would make. Knowing now what I know, having had that experience, going forward in a potential future draft league. But um, I will say that it was a lot of fun. Like I said, I did learn from it, and all that. But I did have goals, as I mentioned before. That is goals going into this tournament, things that I wanted to achieve, and I will share those with you guys. Unfortunately, I didn't achieve most of them, but I'm just going to go through them. So my first goal in entering this tournament was actually to make the top eight cut. And I actually, believe it or not, was not aspiring to just outright win this whole thing. And reason being is because not that I doubted myself or my team, because I didn't. Um, but the fact of the matter is, I was in there with a lot of very good players who had drafted a lot of very strong teams. And I'm a person who likes to do things by the odds. And I didn't think my odds of winning were really there or really, that good at all. Just looking at the sheer numbers behind this. Because, again, like I said, a lot of really strong teams, a lot of really great players, a lot of players with a lot more experience in tournaments like this than I had. But I would have been happy to just make the top eight cut. That was what I was gunning for, and unfortunately, I was not able to do that. So that was kind of disappointing. Um, Next goal I had was to at least break even as far as wins and losses go on this front. And unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, I only had 4 wins and 8 losses, so wasn't able to achieve that either. Just a lot of stiff competition. I had a really rough schedule of opponents, arguably the roughest in the league. Just a lot of really good battlers, a lot of really strong opponents. A lot of just really strong teams, great teams put together. Really had like no room for breathing pretty much the entire season with this. Um, no weeks that I could really kind of just like take it easy or try to pick up a win, to gain momentum or anything like that, because it was like just about every week fighting for my life, just because of how stiff the competition was. And again, like I mentioned, definitely something that was a little bit of a surprise to me. Because as I hadn't mentioned previously, actually, I followed, the last season of this league, and it was definitely a different ball game last time around with this. It was definitely a little more easygoing, a little more casual, I think, as opposed to this season was definitely more competitive, more cutthroat environment. So yeah, yeah, that was another thing. Another goal that I had was that I did not want to place last in my division. This one was just kind of to prove the Killer Nacho wrong, because in his power rankings video in the beginning of the season, he had me ranked last in my division. So kind of wanted to prove him wrong there, just a little friendly rivalry type thing, and unfortunately was not able to do that. I did end up finishing at the bottom of my division, which was again kind of a disappointment. But uh, the next thing, something that I actually did achieve, was that I had the goal to not get blown out or swept at all in the throughout the course of the tournament, and that I did achieve. Which is something, I guess. Pretty much all these games that I've had were very close, very competitive games that hinged on a couple plays or maybe a hack here or there, or a certain degree of preparation here or there. There was really only one game that I lost on a 4-0. Of the 8 losses I took, 3 of them were 1-0 losses. Another couple were 2-0 losses, and another couple were 3-0s. Even those were, pretty close despite the numbers. And then the 4-0, which was not the closest, but still kind of a grueling type game. So I was happy that I was able to avoid the catastrophe of getting swept or blown out. And then the last thing was to just have a good time with it. I would say I achieved that one as well, because it was, like I said, fun, but for a different reason than I was expecting. More fun from a competitive sense than from a just casual sense. So, but yeah, I think that pretty well wraps everything up here. Again, like I said, looking back, I would definitely do a couple things differently. If given the chance, I am looking toward the future now. I will say that when the next season of the draft league rolls around, more than likely I'm going to try to join up again, just to maybe kind of find some redemption here for my Philadelphia Pidgeys. Always the underdogs, but it was a good time, and I'm sure it will be in the future. So, before I go, I do want to take just a couple minutes to talk to you guys about the future of the channel here. Now that the draft league is all said and done, I am actually going to be going back to doing what I have been doing, or had been doing prior to this, which is creating fun, new, and interesting original teams to battle with for you guys. So it's been a long time, obviously, since I've had a new team, pretty much throughout the entire draft league. Basically all of my battles have come from the draft league, so I'm pretty excited to start making some new teams, trying some new strategies, being locked into the basically the same 10 Pokemon throughout the draft league does kind of get a little old after a while. So I'm excited to go back to trying new things, new Pokemon, all that good stuff, and rolling out more new Wi-Fi battles for you guys. So that is going to be to come. Also, we're going to have more podcasts, more episodes of the Captain's Table here with new topics, new guests, old guests, all that good stuff as well. So that is pretty much where I'm going to be going from here. Count on more content from the Captain. So, I think that's about it. Thanks for watching again, everybody. Hope you all enjoyed. Please hit that like button, leave a comment, and/or subscribe if you did enjoy, and stay tuned for more new videos in the future. So, that's it, and we'll see you next time.